mentioned that Mayorkas, and of course it is historic, first cabinet member, 150 years, to be impeached. We've had judges, we've had a couple of presidents. Now we've got Mayorkas, first 150 years. How do you think this affects him on a personal level?
I think this is going to affect him. I think it's getting under his skin. I think it would be embarrassing. Look, regardless of what we think about Mayorkas, he actually has serious credentials. He was the U.S. attorney for Clinton out in Los Angeles. He was the director of one of the service bureaus within DHS under Obama. Then he was the deputy secretary of DHS for Obama. Now he's the secretary for Biden. And, you know, he has a serious background, serious credentials, and he's the first cabinet secretary in 150 years who's been impeached for failing to do his job, for intentionally disregarding federal law. So I can't imagine that that's a good thing for him and that he's proud of the fact that he's been impeached.
So he's impeached. Let's go over to the lawfare section when it comes to President Trump. We know that a number of these cases are going forward. The big one, I think, presidential immunity. Can you give us an update where that is?
Yeah, so the Supreme Court is deciding whether to halt these cases pending its review of whether a former president is immune from prosecution by his successor based upon his official acts as the president of the United States. We have immunity for both civil and criminal prosecution for members of Congress through the speech or debate clause in the Constitution. Federal judges are also immune both civilly and criminally. Right now, only the president's only immune civilly because we've never had a president charged like President Biden and these Democrats have charged Trump 4 times with these bogus charges against him. So now I think the Supreme Court is going to have to take this case. Remember, even Jack Smith back in December said the Supreme Court had to take this case when Jack Smith was pushing the Supreme Court to skip the D.C. Circuit and just take the case, an extraordinary request by Jack Smith. So I don't know how Jack Smith and the Biden Justice Department can turn around now, 2 months later, and say, oh, no, the Supreme Court can't take this case. It's the D.C. Circuit decided, so the Supreme Court should not take this case. That he can't have it both ways. The Supreme Court's going to have to take this case through the normal appellate process. And that includes letting Trump go to the D.C. Circuit and seeking en banc or full court review first, and then they're going to decide, and then Trump's going to file a cert petition. So this is not the bottom line, Jack. This case with Jack Smith and D.C., the January 6th case, is not going to get resolved before the presidential election.
By the way, we do have breaking news. I apologize, Mike, and I'll just say this on the quote unquote national security threat. ABC News is now reporting. I was sort of halfway joking earlier about the Russian space lasers. They're saying that Russia is quote unquote planning to put nuclear weapons in space, not to drop them onto Earth, but rather possibly use against satellites. Quote, it's very concerning and very sensitive, said one source who called it, quote, a big deal. So that's where we got, folks. Russian space lasers, Russian nuclear space lasers now. That's why we've got to pass this money for Ukraine. Mike, something tells me, though, that when we have a situation, look, we know Russia's a nuclear threat. Russia's always been a nuclear threat. That's why President Trump has said that we should seek rapprochement with them. That's why he wanted to seek peace deals with North Korea, if anybody remembers this stuff. This is why, to encapsulate everything that you've said, this is why they're running these bogus cases against him, because they don't want someone in there who wants peace with the world's nuclear powers.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like we might have to take that $60 billion that we're going to send to Ukrainian oligarchs and to our defense contractors in Ukraine, and maybe we should send it to our space command, our space force, right? I mean, if the threat is actually that
this was the founder of the U.S. Space Force.
Yeah, I mean, this needs. We need. Sorry, guys. The bigger threat is Russia blowing up our satellites in space. So Ukraine, sorry, Sorry, you're going to lose 3 Russian-speaking provinces in eastern Ukraine, but we need to defend our satellites. So we're going to spend our $60 billion on Trump's Space Force instead of in Ukraine.
I mean, we really look at this stuff, and again, it's to your point, right? We know the world is a place that has threats. We know the world is a place where we have adversaries. That's the entire point. I teach my kids about this. I say, watch out for, tricky people. Watch out for people who come up and say they know me, they know your mom, they know your dad, and they should, get in the car or something like this. We know the world has threats. We know the world is a dangerous place. That doesn't mean that we panic, and that certainly doesn't mean that you go along with every single neocon that tells you the only way to deal with these threats is through warfare, is through direct mobilization or proxy wars, supporting proxy wars overseas, whether it be in the Middle East, whether it be against Iran, whether it be in Eurasia, against Russia. There are other ways to deal with these specific threats. And sometimes, look, if you know the neighbors have a lot of guns, then maybe you should make friends with the neighbors, or at least try to find a way to get along. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, think about where we are with Ukraine. We had President Obama put Vice President Biden in charge of Ukraine, and Biden's went on the take, including $10 million from Burisma, allegedly. You saw Putin smelling Biden's weakness, and you saw Putin taking advantage of that and going into Crimea. We had 4 years of peace and prosperity. 4 years of peace and prosperity under Trump in Ukraine. You didn't see any aggression by China, by Russia, anywhere, really. And so then Biden's back, and Russia wants to take the rest of Ukraine. I would say to these people who are with their Ukraine flags in their profiles and in their yards, if you want to bring peace and prosperity to the world, if you want to make sure that we don't have bad acts.
Mike Davis, Article 3. Sorry,